Hold on to your berets, folks, because Donald J. Trump is back in the White House. That's right. After 4 tumultuous years, he's back for round 2. And if you thought his first term was a wild ride for U.S.-European relations, buckle up, Buttercup, because this time around promises to be a doozy. Trump's return has sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. The honeymoon period? Non-existent. Remember those special relationship vibes? Ancient history. Instead, we have a transatlantic tango that looks more like a brawl in a Brussels bar. The first month of Trump 2.0 has been a masterclass in diplomatic demolition. Tariffs, back on the menu, NATO criticism, served hot and fresh. The America First playbook is back and Europe is scrambling to figure out its next move. One thing's for sure, this relationship needs couples therapy, stat. Let's not beat around the bush here. Trump doesn't exactly see eye to eye with Europe. In fact, he's called the European Union an enemy of the United States. Ouch. For Trump, the EU is a competitor, a rival, a threat to American economic dominance. He sees their trade practices as unfair, their defense spending as paltry, and their social policies as, well, just plain weird. Remember the Paris Climate Agreement? Trump pulled out, calling it a bad deal for America. He routinely bashed NATO, labeling it obsolete and demanding that European allies pay their fair share for defense. Trump's distrust of the EU runs deep. He sees them as a bunch of freeloaders taking advantage of American generosity while undermining U.S. interest on the world stage, and he's not afraid to say it, loudly and often. Trump's disdain for the EU isn't just talk. He's put his money where his mouth is, slapping tariffs on European steel and aluminum imports. Trade wars, anyone? The Trump administration argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries. The EU, however, saw them as an attack on their economy and vowed to retaliate. And retaliate they did, imposing their own tariffs on a range of American goods. Meanwhile, Trump's criticism of NATO has left the alliance reeling. He's repeatedly questioned its relevance in the 21st century and accused European members of not pulling their weight. This has created a deep sense of unease within the alliance, undermining its unity and effectiveness. The transatlantic rift is widening, and the future of U.S.-European relations looks increasingly uncertain. It's not just about economics and defense, folks. Trump's America and the European Union are on opposite sides of a cultural and ideological divide. Europe, with its progressive social policies, is a world away from Trump's conservative America. Take climate change, for example. While Europe is pushing for ambitious climate action, the Trump administration rolled back environmental regulations and pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Then there's the issue of LGBTQ+ rights. Europe has made significant strides in promoting equality for LGBTQ+ people. Trump, on the other hand, has rolled back protections for transgender individuals and appointed conservative judges with a history of opposing LGBTQ+ rights. The cultural gap between the US and Europe is becoming increasingly difficult to bridge. What Europeans see as progress, Trump and his supporters often view as a threat to traditional values. And that's a recipe for tension and misunderstanding. Remember AUKUS, that little security pact between the US, the UK, and Australia? Well, it turns out it wasn't just about submarines. It was a slap in the face to France, and it sent shockwaves through Europe. France, which had a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal with Australia, was completely blindsided by the AUKUS announcement. They felt betrayed by their allies, especially the US, and accused them of stabbing them in the back. The AUKUS deal was seen by many as a sign that the US was shifting its strategic focus away from Europe and towards the Indo-Pacific region. It was a clear signal that America's priorities were changing, and Europe was no longer at the top of the list. The French were furious, and rightfully so. The AUKUS debacle highlighted the growing mistrust and suspicion between the US and its European allies. The ongoing war in Ukraine has become a flashpoint in US-European relations. While both sides agree on the need to support Ukraine against Russian aggression, there are significant differences in their approach. Trump has been critical of European countries for not doing enough to help Ukraine, accusing them of relying too heavily on the US for military and financial support. He has also questioned the wisdom of providing Ukraine with lethal aid, arguing that it could escalate the conflict. European leaders, on the other hand, have stressed the importance of maintaining a united front against Russia. They have argued that providing Ukraine with the means to defend itself is essential to deterring further Russian aggression. The war in Ukraine has exposed the cracks in the transatlantic alliance. It has highlighted the diverging views on Russia, defense spending, and the role of NATO. So, what does the future hold for US-European relations? It's not looking good, folks. The transatlantic partnership, once the bedrock of the post-war world order, is in deep trouble. Trump's America First agenda, His disdain for multilateralism and his confrontational approach have alienated America's closest allies. His policies have created a climate of mistrust and suspicion, making it increasingly difficult to find common ground. The cultural and ideological divide between the US and Europe is also widening. Trump's conservative social policies and his rhetoric on issues like immigration and Islam have created a sense of unease among many Europeans. The transatlantic relationship is at a crossroads, the stakes are high and the consequences of failure are significant. The future of US-European relations hangs in the balance. The Trump administration's actions have strained the transatlantic partnership to its breaking point. The question now is whether this once unbreakable bond can be repaired. The challenges are significant. Trust needs to be rebuilt, differences need to be bridged, and a new shared vision for the future needs to be forged. Whether this is possible in the current political climate remains to be seen. One thing is certain, the world is a more dangerous place when the US and Europe are at odds. A strong and united transatlantic partnership is essential for addressing global challenges, from climate change to terrorism, to the rise of authoritarianism. The time for healing and reconciliation is now. The fate of the transatlantic alliance and indeed the world may depend on it.